Good morning, and I'm glad you're here. So what do you think? Anything come to mind? Things that you were warned about growing up not to do?
Don't run with scissors.
Don't run with scissors. I don't think I was ever warned about that one, but what else? What are things that kind of, you think back and, maybe they made sense to you back then. Probably they make more sense to you now if you're older, but what are some things that you were told, don't do this, or else? Don't swim after eating. Is this the worst you guys ever did? Run with scissors and eat food, or go swimming after eating?
My mama told me you gotta shop around.
You gotta shop around. You gotta shop around. Well, you didn't do enough shopping, did you? What else? I mean, I was told, no strangers. Don't talk to strangers. What else?
Don't play with matches.
That one I had a lot. I had the fire department out a couple times. Little pyro I was. But anyway, what other things were you warned? Hey, don't do this or else. Don't sneak out at night. That was the one I warned my kids about. And it was like, it didn't work for me. I hope it worked for you. What else?
Don't do drugs.
Don't do drugs. Well, okay, why not? And you'd probably say because, right? Because it's too expensive. No, you would give her. What else were you warned not to do growing up? Let's see, don't run with scissors, shop around. I don't know what that one meant, but anyway, what else? Don't steal. Yeah, mine was don't talk back, or else. I used to get that. Be careful. You can ask me a question, but my dad would say, but be respectful to me. What else?
Don't make me come up there.
Yeah. Basically, you do that while you're reading the paper and you never have any intention of moving, right? You're not moving. You just got to say that. Whatever you're doing up there, stop it. Or if I come up there, you're going to regret it. Right? Why did we do things? Why did our parents tell us these things and say these things to us? Because they were dumb and ignorant. They didn't trust us, right? I mean, they're old-fashioned, and everybody else is doing it. Why can't I? And my parents are so, and you roll your eyes at them and things like that. They didn't want me to have fun. What's wrong with matches? What's wrong with starting fires in the basement? I used to fire firecrackers off in the basement, things like, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with making pipe bombs? That was my older brother, not me. And never mind about him, but seriously now, why did our parents say don't do these things, and oftentimes with a consequence or else kind of thing? What would the number one reason be? No, it starts with an L. They loved you, right? I know it's hard to believe that anybody could love you when they don't let you do things that are so fun and everybody else is doing them anyway. But believe it or not, they weren't ignorant. More likely than not, they warned you not to do that because they did it when they were your age. Experience, yeah. They just had that experience. But they loved you. God has rules for us, right? And we're going to look again in the book of Jude about this coming judgment. So if you have a Bible with you, I'm going to be in the book of Jude here. Just for a quick page reference, I'm on page 1027. 1027, if you're in that Bible in the seat in front of you. If you're not, you're on your own to find it. We're going to be looking at verses 5 through 7 here. Here's what this book is about. It's a warning. It's saying, don't do this, or else. And the motivation for this book is this. God sees the danger. And He loves you and saying, don't go down this path because it is going to hurt you. All right? And so this is a book of warning, because if you were here last week, or if you're familiar with this book at all, this is written to a church or some churches. And what was going on, this book was written probably around the mid-60 AD, and it was one of the earlier books. There's a lot of the New Testament that hadn't been written yet. In fact, those, if they had been written, they weren't being passed around and copied very much. So what you have is people coming into the church with motives to change it from what God had wanted it to be. And the church is people who are called out of this world and the brokenness of the world and the sinfulness of this world. And they're called out, listen, come together and let's experience a little bit of heaven on earth. Let's experience forgiveness. Let's experience love. And let's experience holiness. And by the way, holiness is walking or being set aside for God and separating yourself from the things that have broken you, hurt you, and broken that relationship with God. And of course, people were coming into the church in those days, hey, I've heard from God too. I had this dream. And this is what God is saying here. And we can do these things. God loves us. And, we can be promiscuous, and we can engage in all kinds of deviant behavior. And in the book of Jude, a lot of the wrong behavior was sexual intimacy outside the bonds of marriage. That was the number one thing that seemed to be coming in. So for you that think you older people like me, the 60s revolution, that was nothing new. Free sex and all that, it began a lot longer than that. And it was very destructive back then. It's very destructive today, and we see it's happening still. And so what we're learning today, what we're going to look at today, is God is saying, listen, I'm going to warn you that this is going to lead to your harm. Okay? There is judgment coming, because what you're doing is hurting these people, and if you don't stop and repent, you're going to end up hurt through my judgment. So let's take a look at this today. And by the way, why is this comforting or encouraging to us today to learn that God's judgment is coming? Does that help you at all? I mean, isn't the church supposed to be talking about love and forgiveness and God is love? And, we don't want to talk about the coming judgment for evil, but it's there in the Bible. In fact, as a little side note, I think you've heard this before. Jesus speaks in the Gospels. Jesus speaks more of hell and damnation than he does of heaven by far. I'm not quite sure why. Maybe because he was very serious about it. All right. But what is there comfort for you when you think about this? Is there any kind of comfort or encouragement for you to know that there is a God whose judgment is coming? Does it comfort you? And if so, why? All right, well, let's find out, okay? Maybe we'll discover a little bit about this in a minute here. Let's begin by looking at verses 5 through 7 together, shall we? Jude, by the way, remember who Jude is? Half-brother of Jesus, full brother of James, who wrote the book of James. So he had this intimacy of knowing his brother, even though he wasn't a believer until after the resurrection of Jesus Christ and Jesus appears to him. That's when Jude became a believer. He writes these words, beginning verse 5. Now I want to remind you, although you once fully knew it, that Jesus, who saved a people out of the land of Egypt, afterward destroyed those who did not believe, and the angels who did not stay within their position of authority, but left their proper dwelling, he is kept in eternal chains under the gloomy darkness until the judgment of the great day. Just as Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding cities, which likewise indulged in sexual immorality and pursued unnatural desire, serve as an example by undergoing a punishment of eternal life. So he says this is kind of a reminder. He's saying we can learn from people's past errors, mistakes, fallenness, and their sin. All right? We take a look at this here. He says, now I want to remind you that although you once fully knew it, he's reminding them. Now remember, Jude was written at a very early time, and that means the church was mainly made up of Jews. And these Jews, Jewish people, descendants of Abraham, who grew up under the law and the Old Testament, would know of these stories he's about to tell us. We're going to be familiar with many of these stories too. So he's saying, I want to remind you, although you once fully knew it, that Jesus saved a people out of the land of Egypt. That's pretty interesting, isn't it? When you go back to the book of Exodus, the Lord sends Moses back to Egypt, and he does numerous miracles, and Pharaoh finally sets God's people free, and they travel through the desert to go to the promised land. And as they were traveling through the desert, God gave them the law. Explain, this is how we're going to have a relationship. This is my promise to you, my covenant to you is I'm going to be the Lord if you want me to. And they agreed, yes, we want you to be the Lord. And he saved them out of Egypt. The Lord did. But now Jude identifies who the Lord is. Isn't that interesting? Jesus. So, sometimes when you read the Old Testament, you're always thinking of God. Whenever he spoke and things like that. But Jesus is the one who gave the law. He wasn't called Jesus back then. He was called Yahweh, Jehovah, the Lord God. But that was whom we know as Jesus. Even though Jesus wasn't born as a man yet, he was certainly the eternal Son of God who existed. So Jesus saves the people out of the land of Egypt, but afterward, he destroyed those who did not believe. That's pretty harsh, isn't it? I mean, how many of you would contemplate sinning, doing something wrong? God says don't do this, and you say, I'm going to do it anyway, knowing full well you would be destroyed or eliminated from life on earth. You might say, I'm going to think twice about that. And that's what this warning here is about for us. See, grace is free. Forgiveness is free to us. It wasn't free to Jesus, was it? It cost him dearly. Cost him tremendous amount of suffering and pain on the cross and humiliation. He left his throne in heaven and endured the fallenness of this world, and all the sins of this world were placed upon him, and he died this death. It cost him dearly, but it's free to us. Okay? But the freedom that cost, let me start. When Jesus saved people out of the land of Egypt, it didn't cost them anything but faith. They had to believe and say, I'm going to walk out, and they walked out. And they experienced all these miracles, more miracles than you and I will ever experience in this life. Tremendous miracles. The greatest one to my mind is the separating the Red Sea so they could walk through it on dry land. And despite seeing all these miracles, when it came to entering into the promised land, and you know the story here, they sent some spies from each one of the 12 tribes. So 12 men came and searched out the land. They came back and said the land is full of wonderful things and it's a great place to live, but there's giants in the land and we can't go in there. They'll kill us all. And in this disobedience, this lack of faith, they were saying, well, then now you don't get to go into there. They had to wander in the desert for 40 years until that generation died. And that's what he means they were destroyed. Why? Because of their lack of faithfulness. That's one example. He goes on to another example here. He says, and this is kind of a difficult one for us to understand, but he says, and the angels who did not keep their proper domain, but left their own abode, he has reserved in everlasting chains under darkness for the judgment of the great day. Who were these angels and what did they do? Not apparently, but in truth, a matter of fact, there is a number of angelic beings who right now are in utter darkness. By the way, that's a picture of hell. For people who think, well, hell will be, I'll be with all my friends. You're going to be in utter, not you, but people who reject Christ are going to be in utter darkness. As dark as you can see. That's a creepy thing. But it's a warning that God is serious about this. So, these angels are in this place of a dungeon-like place in darkness with everlasting chains. Now, I think that's figurative. I don't think they have real chains, but they are bound by the will of God until the final judgment. In other words, they're like somebody in our world that gets arrested. You don't have a trial, but they're going to keep you in jail until your trial date because they know you're a danger. We're going to keep you here out of society, and you're going to wait until your judgment. And after the trial, assuming you're convicted, you're going to go to prison. So these are being held for that final judgment. Who were these angels? A little speculation here, but by the way, if you ever want to read more about this, go to 2 Peter, especially chapters 2 and 3. It gives us pretty much similar description of this. But because of the next verse, and let's look at that real quick, he says, in a similar way, Sodom and Gomorrah gave up, and the surrounding towns gave themselves up to sexual immorality and perversion. Now, he's saying in a similar way, so whatever these angels did, it was similar to what was going on in Sodom and Gomorrah. And if you know your Bible in the Old Testament, the book of Genesis, we know that Lot lived who was a nephew of Abraham, lived in Sodom, and he experienced what a perverted society their perversion was demonstrated in their sexual perversion, homosexual acts, and when the angels were sent by God, a couple good angels sent by God to investigate what was going on and to bring out those people who had not defiled themselves, and it would have been Lot and his family. They were sought out by the men of the city who wanted to rape them. And that was a picture of a broken, degenerate, perverted society. So what he's saying is, in a similar way, these angels did something similar. And we don't know exactly what it was. Many would go to Genesis chapter 6, where right before the flood, Noah's flood, where it says the sons of God looked upon the daughters of man and engaged in sexual immorality with them. And now, who were the sons of God? That is a term that can be applied to both followers of Yahweh or Jehovah and also angels. In the book of Job, angels are called sons of God. But if that is what's going on here, what does it mean that these angels came and they looked upon these women, but they're spiritual beings, they don't have bodies, how can they engage in sexual immorality with human women? Don't know. They can come in the form of humans. We know angels could eat food when they were in a human form and they could be touched. And certainly in Sodom and Gomorrah, when the men of the city looked at these angels, they looked really real to them and they wanted to engage in sexual immorality with these men. So some believe that they were really angels who came down. Others believe that these fallen angels came down and possessed human men and perverted them and engaged in sexual immorality. Others feel like Genesis 6 is, godly men who looked upon women of the world. But if the one that makes most sense here is that these angels did something similar to the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. And the result is it was so grievous to God that he locked them into chains so that they could never do anything like that again. And it serves as a warning to people. So, anyway, these things, as they say, they serve as an example to those who suffer the punishment of eternal fire. How was Sodom and Gomorrah destroyed? If you remember the story, fire came down from heaven and destroyed the cities and everybody who lived in it that weren't taken out by the angels here. Terrible warnings, terrible examples. And it was meant to say, folks, don't go down this road. Be careful what you bring into the church. Be careful about who you listen to. Doesn't matter how nice they are, but as we read last week, some of these people were, and they use the word creeping into the church. In other words, they come under, they're hidden, their motives are hidden. You don't assume they're evil people, but they're bringing in evil teaching. And from what we gather here, that evil was manifested in sexual perversion within the church. And that's what the warning is here. You know, years ago, punishment for crimes was often done publicly. Now, I'm not advocating that again today, believe me. I'm not advocating public hangings and public executions. And, you know, in France, they would guillotine people during the French Revolution. In the Old West, and even throughout the United States, when people were found guilty of murder or other crimes worthy of capital punishment, the hanging was done public, and people would gather around and see that. Again, I'm not advocating that. It was used in the Roman world. When they did crucifixions for rebellion, they could, there's one incident where they lined miles and miles of roads of people who were being crucified. So as you walk past that, you would realize, I don't want to go through that. I'm going to do what I'm told. That was the whole idea here. But there is a place for, in one sense, to not hide behind walls the consequences of wrongdoing. Now, bear with me for a minute here. All right. How many of you would want your children to be involved in a terrible car accident? And nobody's going to raise their hand, because you'd be a fool to want your kids hurt like that. But sometimes, now I remember years ago, I don't know, did anybody ever have to watch those movies during driver's ed? Do they still do that? Where you have to watch these movies, and in these movies there are gruesome pictures of people who have died in a car accident? Do they still do those things? Somebody who's taken driver's ed recently, let me know. They still do that, huh? I passed out. Just don't tell anybody. I still have those images in my mind, Did it make me become a safe driver? No. But it served a purpose, right? I look at this picture here, and, if I was driving by and I had my teenagers in the car ready, they're going to be driving soon, I would probably remind them of something here. I hope you wear your seatbelt, because see what can happen? You see that? I hope you drive safely, because see what can happen if you don't? Take a look at this picture. I don't know if you see what's across the street on the other side of the railroad tracks. It's a cemetery. How apropos. I hope nobody was really killed in this accident here, and I wouldn't dare show pictures of something like that. But it is a reminder that sometimes we need to allow children, even of ourselves, to see the consequences of evil or foolish behavior. And that's what is going on in this story here. Okay? The writer, Jude, is trying to remind the church, you people in the church, you have to have your eyes open. You need to be awake, because if you open those doors and let just people come into this church and teach things that are not taught by the apostles, are not found in the scriptures, you are bringing this into the church. Lives are going to be hurt. Lives are going to be destroyed. And it's for your safety. It's because God cares about you that He warns you. The second warning comes here is about, there is a coming judgment, and He takes us into the lessons that the people of Israel and the new church would be aware of. And now He talks about judgments for the evil deeds. Kind of a hard message to preach, because it doesn't really make people feel good. But it's the truth here. Let's look at verses 8 through 11. Verse 8, yet in like manner these people also, relying on their dreams, defile the flesh, reject authority, and blaspheme the glorious ones. But when the archangel Michael, contending with the devil, was disputing about the body of Moses, he did not presume to pronounce a blasphemous judgment, but said, the Lord rebuke you. But these people blaspheme all that they do not understand, and they are destroyed by all that they, like unreasoning animals, understand instinctively. Woe to them, for they walked in the way of Cain and abandoned themselves for the sake of gain to Balaam's error and perished in Korah's rebellion. All right, so he's going to give us 4 more examples of what evil deeds look like, and we're going to look at the sense of, what was within that person, what were they trying to gain, or what caused them to go in these directions here. He begins by saying, yet in the same way these men also by dreaming defile the flesh. So they're coming in here, and remember this book was written in the mid-60s, and so they didn't have a complete Bible. It was a very challenging time for the new church, and that's why God sent them the apostles, and one of the signs of an apostle was the ability to do miracles. And the reason the apostles were given this ability to do miracles was to authenticate that God was speaking through them. So these guys come into the church and say this, hey, God's been speaking to me. Really? Yeah, I had this dream. You need to listen to me. He's setting us free. And they start introducing the ways to defile the flesh and revile angelic majesties. And I'm not sure how they were doing that, but perhaps they just looked at, in a way, they were mocking or scorning or ridiculing the way the scriptures came about. Hey, you don't really believe this thing. You're not really trusting in these stories you've heard. How do you know they've happened? Well, an angel spoke to Moses or this or that, and say, angels are nothing. And there's kind of scorning of angelic beings here. And they're coming into the church. And so he says, but listen, this is how ridiculous this is, that people who make fun of angelic beings or heavenly beings here. He says, but even the archangel Michael, as we understand scriptures, seems to be like a military rank, like a general. Literally, it means prince. Okay? He was a very powerful angel. There's only 3 angels named in scriptures by name: Michael, Gabriel, and who? I still can't hear. Lucifer, thank you, Lucifer, or Satan. Only 3 angels. Now, there are apocryphal books that name others, and an apocryphal book are books that were written before the New Testament was written. They weren't really recognized by most churches as Scripture. They're kind of historical books and things like that, religious books here. But anyway, these are only 3 angels, and Michael's an archangel. He's a prince. He's a very powerful angel. Very few, it seems, were as powerful of an angel as Michael was. And yet with all his power, he even refused to scorn a heavenly being. And in this case, it was Satan, the devil. So what was going on here? This is a story that we don't know much about. And it comes out of a book that is not a biblical book. It was called The Assumption of Moses. We don't have any copies of it today. We only have very little parts of it. But we do have what people referring to it, some of the church fathers in the 1st and 2nd century, writing stories about this book called The Assumption of Moses. And in this book is this story about when Moses died. If you remember, it's in the end of the book of Deuteronomy. Moses told you can't go into the promised land, but Moses says, can I at least see it? And God says, I'll let you look at it. And so Moses by himself went up into the mountains on the one side of the Jordan River, and he was allowed to see the promised land. And after he saw it, he died. He was alone. And scriptures tell us that the Lord buried him in a secret place, so nobody could find him. Why would he do that? That's up for speculation. Many believe that the reason is because Israel came out of Egypt. What was Egypt known to do with dead people that were important to them? They would mummify them. And they could keep them for thousands of years, right? And I suppose many people would agree with this, that the danger, if Israel were to find Moses' body, they would keep it. And they would keep it to idolize it. So God buried it. Satan wanted it back. Likely because Satan wanted to cause a spiritual trap, a place of danger for Israel, that they would start to focus and put their faith in Moses and not in Yahweh. And so he buries it. Satan wants to dig it up. God sends Michael. Don't let him have it. Michael resists Satan, and we're not sure how two spiritual beings can do this kind of stuff. But anyway, Michael does not scorn Satan. He does not ridicule Satan. He has a deep respect for Lucifer, for Lucifer's power, and also because he was a creature created by God. All right? And so, what does he do? He's disputing with the devil about Moses, arguing with him. I don't know what they were doing, but he did not dare condemn Satan. Instead, he says, "The Lord rebuke you. I'll let the Lord deal with you, Satan." And apparently it worked, right? Because they never did find that body. And it's so, what's the lesson we learn out of this here? Is that even demonic powers who are evil, who want to hurt you, who want to destroy you, and could kill you if they were permitted to, we are still to have a sense of respect. Not honor them as worthy of anything, but they're dangerous. We don't mess with them. We don't ridicule them. We don't make fun of them. The Lord rebuke you. Is that something you can do today? Sure, I believe. How does Satan work on your life? He's a great accuser. He causes doubt. He can say, God doesn't love you. Nobody really likes you. You're a failure. You keep sinning. God's tired of you. Why don't you just give up? Or he goes the other way. You are the most wonderful person in the world. God is lucky to have you. He'll do anything he can in your mind to mess with you. And the best thing to do is to know your scriptures, to know truth. God loves me. I'm a sinner who is saved by grace. Satan, be gone. The Lord rebuke you. Get those thoughts out of your mind, but replace them with true thoughts. Okay, if there's an application here. But is there a danger of Moses being really idolized? Anybody, can you make out what this here is? It's a Shroud of Turin. Fantastic story. Read about it. I'd encourage you to Google it and try to figure out because it's interesting. Apparently, they have this shroud that they can trace back nearly a couple thousand years, and this shroud has this image in it. It's a full-length, 6-foot-long shroud, and you can see, especially the one on the left is his face, and on the other side is his back. It looks like a human being in there. Now, they have attributed this to Jesus Christ, that this is him. This is his shroud. And here's another facial picture. This has defied science. They cannot explain this. It is a fantastic story. Do I believe it's true? I don't know. But I will say this, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. This doesn't validate my faith. And if it's proven to be true, I'll say that's cool. If it's proven to be false, okay. I don't know what it is. But here's the danger it's become. And that is this here. Here's another thing. You know what this here is. And again, it's a statue of Mary, and she's crying. And there's a number of these things, as I've studied this, a number of these statues and figurines where it shows a saint or a religious saint for some people, or a Mary crying here and shedding tears, and people have come to bow down, people have come down to pray to her and things like that. And there's the danger. I have no problem with people understanding the worthiness of Mary, who was God has chosen, and even he said, Mary, you are greatly blessed by God, and we need to respect who she was. But what has happened here, it's gone to the place where people substitute these things for Christ. And maybe that's what the problem with Moses was going to be. Do we do that today? There are a lot of things that we can have in our lives that can if you go to some very old churches, and often, whether they're Catholic churches or Presbyterian churches, you'll see these images on the wall and paintings and things like that, and you can say, well, that's all idolatry. And I say, well, no, hold on, it isn't always idolatry. Because for many centuries, people didn't know how to read or write, and those are the stories of the gospel. the stories of Christ that people could point to, and the priest could say, see this, and that's how people would remember these things and learn of these things. But then what happens, because we're so human and we so much like to just make things bigger than they ought to be, they became subject of idolatry and worship, like they are more important to us than believing that Christ's Spirit lives within me and He lives within you. And I don't need this or that for my faith. He goes on here, and let's talk about the judgment for evil character here in verses 12 through 13. Jude goes on, he says, now he's talking about the people who come into the church, these false teachers. He said, these false teachers are hidden reefs at your love feasts. As they feast with you without fear, shepherds feeding themselves, waterless clouds swept along by winds, fruitless trees in late autumn, twice dead, uprooted, wild waves of the sea casting up the foam of their own shame, wandering stars for whom the gloom of utter darkness has been reserved forever. Not much of a joyful passage, is it? But I still believe these things can be encouraging and comforting to us. But so he says, these men are like hidden reefs in your love feast. Now, what is a hidden reef? It's something underwater, right? And you don't see it. So you're sailing along, and all of a sudden something rips open the bottom of your boat, and your boat's going to sink. Sometimes that's why they have buoys warning people, or people have maps of underwater character of what's the shoreline, things like that, so you can safely navigate that. But these people are hidden. They're hidden reefs in your love feast. Now, what is a love feast? Well, they do what we do. They have potlucks. People gather for food. And you're gathering for food, you think everything is wonderful, and the person's smiling, and you're laughing with you, and you're enjoying. They show concern for you, and you talk to them, and you think these are very wonderful people, but they're dangerous, and they're hidden. Their real intent is hidden from you. And they do so without fear, because there's nobody to catch them, nobody to stand up to them, nobody who knows the truth. But now he describes what they really are like. They care for themselves. These are some of the signs of a false teacher, by the way. One of the signs of a false teacher is they're in it for themselves, they care about themselves, and they're going to feed off of you. He says they're caring for themselves, clouds without water. What does that mean? Well, if you live in a dry area there, you look at the clouds coming, and it gives you hope, and the clouds are coming, but before you know it, they are dry, and they just pass over, and it's kind of demoralizing, isn't it? They promise, but they can never perform. Carried along by winds, autumn trees without fruit. Autumn is when you pick apples, right? You go there, but there's no apples. Everything else looks the same. You got the leaves, it looks like a healthy tree. Where are the apples? There's nothing there. So you go to these people who become your teachers and your leaders, but they don't rain on you. They give you no fruit. They just take from you. Then he calls them doubly dead, twice dead. What are your thoughts on that? How can something be dead twice? A couple thoughts I had about this. Either it's talking about, man, they're really dead. They're not dead, but they're really, really dead. It's one way of looking at it, perhaps the right way, but another way to look at it is not only are they dead, they're going to make you dead too. They're dead, and they're going to make you dead too. But they're so nice. They love me. They care about me. Well, their real motive is hidden from you. Doubly dead and uprooted here. There are wild waves of the sea, foaming their own shame. Foaming out their own shame here. Wild waves. Well, what's a wild wave? A wild wave isn't carried by current. It's carried by the winds and the storms, and they're extremely destructive. And before you know it, they've overturned your boat or crashed upon shore and destroyed your home or this or that. But I like this saying about wandering stars. What how are these people wandering stars? Well, stars are fixed in the sky, right? And people can navigate by stars because they know where the North Star is. Was it the last star of the Milky Way? Or the little, not the Milky Way, the Big Dipper. Did I get that right? Probably not. Anyway, you know where it is. And every day, if you know where the North Star is, you can navigate. And people do it on the oceans. They can do it in space. They always know because these stars are always going to be in the same place all the time. And there's comfort and there's encouragement. It's like having the Scriptures. The Scriptures aren't changing. What it said 2,000 years ago, it says the same thing today. What it meant 2,000 years ago, yes, it means the same thing today. And you can count on it. But these guys, you can't count on them. They're taking you here and then they're taking you there. They're like a comet with no fixed gravitational pull or asteroid. Just where did that go? And you're following them. But they're just leading you into darkness where they are. They're not fixed. We stay fixed when we stay in the Scriptures. And they are kept for whom the gloom of darkness is kept for eternity. So, where's the comfort for us in this passage? You can walk out here today and say, man, that's a kind of a heavy message, and it is a heavy message. I mean, you can't make jokes about this stuff. You can't try to lighten it up. There's just no way to do it. This is real. But we're adults and we need to know these things. And there's the comfort. It's knowing that God is still sovereign. God is aware. God knows what's going on in this world. And so the question is then, well, why aren't you doing anything about it? Why do countries get destroyed? Why do people die and suffer? Why do you let such evil continue in this world, God, if you know about it? And we don't have all the answers. We have some answers, and this is one I'll share with you. Out of 2 Peter chapter 3, he says, but by the same word, the heavens and earth that now exist are stored up for fire, being kept until the day of judgment and destruction of the ungodly. All right, so God is basically saying here is, I know the situation, and it's coming to an end. It's coming to an end. That's one hope for us. As bad as this world is here, it's not going to continue on like this. And then he goes on to say after this, but a day is like 1,000 years to the Lord, and 1,000 days is like a day to the Lord. He goes on and says, gives us one of the reasons why he is holding punishment. But the Lord is not slow in keeping his promise, as some understand slowness. He is patient with you. And he's talking about the world. He's patient, not wanting anyone to perish. It's not a joyful thing for God to cast people into the darkness of gloom. It's not something he wants to do. He loves you, he cares about you, and he'll give you all that you need to believe and to change if you're willing. He's not wanting, but he wants everyone to come to repentance. I often thought about this, and if I said, God, I want you to clean out all the evil in creation. Well, then there's the question, who's evil? Well, that person's evil. What about your evil? Come on, God, lighten up a little bit with me. I'm not perfect. Clean up the evil. Who's evil? Everybody's evil. What about somebody you love that doesn't not yet know Christ yet? Do you want their chances to end right now? I don't think so. I think we care, and we have to trust God. Judgment is coming. That's comforting to me. God is aware. That's comforting to me. God loves me enough to warn me and warn us as a church. Be careful about the teachings we let in here. Let's not let wandering stars come in here that are going to lead us astray, but let's fix our sights on the truth of Scriptures and let's stay with them, keep them, no matter if they're controversial in our culture today or not. We're going to stay with the teachings of Scripture because that is the hope that we have. Father God, thank you so much for your goodness. Thank you for your love. Thank you for these Scriptures. And Father, thank you for the warning that we have about the coming judgment. It's not always comforting to know that there will be pain and suffering, but we are comforted in the fact that every person that's done evil has an opportunity to turn to you and find your love and your forgiveness by simply believing that Jesus Christ died on the cross for their sins. And by believing and receiving Him as Savior, they can avoid this coming judgment also. We thank you for this truth. In Jesus' name, amen.